They thought it was just another charity gala. A sweep of chandeliers, a string quartet humming in the corner, a red carpet warmed by camera flashes. Crystal flutes clinked, diamonds caught the light, and everyone smiled the way people do when they are sure the night belongs to them. I watched them float past the step and repeat, laughing for the photographers, believing in their own invincibility. They did not see me in the doorway, or if they did, they assumed I had come to stand in the familiar shadows. The discarded sister. The family embarrassment. The woman who could not let things go. I'm Rachel Morgan, and tonight, every server in that ballroom, every camera perched on a marble column, every bouquet and seating chart and whispered cue was mine. They called it a charity gala coordinated by my brother's closest allies. They tied my family name to a cause and wrapped it in silk and etiquette. They wrote speeches about generosity. They sent invitations with my father's crest embossed in gold. I let them. I designed the invitation. They arrived in waves. Daniel's board members in their midnight tuxedos and practiced grins. The lawyer who had drafted statements that made me sound unwell. The CFO who had signed off on numbers that never added up. The publicist who taught donors to doubt me. Old family friends who patted my hand while taking my future out of it. The woman at my mother's elbow who said, with a voice like perfume, that a daughter who loves her family does not make trouble. I had spent years collecting the opposite of perfume. Paper. Receipts. Timelines. The ugly handwriting of the truth. When they pushed me out after my father's sudden death, they called it a transition. Daniel needed space to lead, they said. Stability. The papers ran photos of him at ribbon cuttings, the caption labeling him visionary. I was reduced to a footnote, the sister who could not accept the inevitable. He told donors I was emotional. He told the board I was a distraction. He told our mother I was a problem. Here is what I never said out loud. The night my father died, I stopped believing in coincidence. He had spent months telling me he wanted me to run the business. We met after hours in his study, reviewing deals, mapping the next decade. He had a draft succession plan in his desk. He promised me that at the next board meeting, he would name me as his successor. He did not make it to that meeting. A heart attack, they said. It happens. He worked too hard. He was under stress. It happens. It did not feel like it happened. It felt like it was arranged. But a feeling is not evidence, and grief is not proof. They buried him, and then they buried me. You learn patience in the dark. You learn where to place your feet and where the stairs creak. I rebuilt my life under a different ceiling. I took cases no one else wanted. I learned to read ledgers like skin, where they bruise, where they breathe, where they lie. I made friends with people who live behind stories instead of in front of them. Investigative reporters, compliance officers, analysts who follow money through shell companies the way a hunter follows tracks in new snow. I learned the quiet of the long game. The gala came to me in pieces. First, the venue, a museum atrium with a third level for lighting rigs and cameras. Then the cover, a fundraiser in the name of the very foundation Daniel weaponized to polish his image. Then the cast, servers trained to do more than carry trays, a stage manager with Broadway nerves and a steel spine, photographers who could shoot on cue and upload faster than most people blink. Real donors and real press received real invitations. Every lie my brother told had written on the back of a truth. I would return the favor. My mother arrived on the arm of a family friend, silver wrap draped over her shoulders, her smile brittle as the stem of her glass. You look beautiful, I told her. It was true. Beauty and denial often hold hands. She did not ask me where I had been these last months. She asked whether I was well. She meant, are you going to behave? The first hour unfolded exactly the way a gala should. A string quartet and champagne. The murmur of money moving toward the bar. I walked table to table, the polite ghost of a hostess. They said my name with careful teeth. They glanced at the stage the way you glance at a mirror you trust. They did not know that on the third level, behind a velvet rope, my team watched their reflections on a bank of screens. At 8:40, the lights warmed. The MC cleared his throat. The first video was supposed to be a tribute to my father's philanthropy. It began that way. Archival footage of him breaking ground on a housing project. My father turning to a camera, weathered hands folded, the line at his eyes deepened by laughter. Then the frame split, the tribute shrinking to the left. To the right, numbers appeared like frost patterns, dates, transfers, entity names. A simple story. This donation never arrived where the brochure said it would. The money went first to a consulting firm with no employees, then to a holding company with a name that sounded like a summer wind, then to a personal account that belonged to the CFO who had just lifted his glass to the memory of my father. The servers I had hired set down trays and began setting down folders. Not napkins, copies, receipts. The CFO opened one, blinked, laughed, said mistake. On screen, a second set of transfers lit up. The mistake had a pattern, and the pattern had his signature. You could feel the oxygen change. Donors shifted in their chairs. Journalists straightened their spines. The CFO's laugh shrank into a throat clear. Then the lawyer's turn. Clips of him defending the foundation's transparency overlapped with recordings he did not know existed, calls with vendors pressed to inflate invoices, emails with redacted names that were now unredacted, handwritten notes that matched a calendar entry he had scrubbed. He said the tapes were edited. He said his words were out of context. My actor servers did not argue. They had nothing to say. The documents spoke. A woman 2 tables over whispered, "Is this part of the program?" Her friend said, "God, I hope so." A board member stood, then sat, then stood again. The publicist's smile held because smiles are reflexes, and reflexes take longer to die than reputations. I watched Daniel watch the room. His eyes went from amused to alert to offended to calculating, each expression sliding like cards in a dealer's hand. He adjusted his cufflink. He whispered to the MC. He put his hand on our mother's chair and squeezed. She flinched. Then it was time to speak. I did not walk to the podium like a conquering hero. I walked the way a surgeon walks to a table. Clean hands. Steady breath. The string quartet had gone silent, but the room hummed like an incandescent bulb. "Good evening," I said. "Thank you for gathering to honor the legacy of Morgan Foundation." My father believed rooms like this carried responsibility. If you gathered to applaud, you must also gather to listen. I could have listed all the ways they broke me. How they smeared my name so donors would stop taking my calls. How they sent quiet messages to friends advising distance. How they questioned my sanity when I questioned their math. I did not. I said instead, "I used to think revenge lived in the dark. I thought you had to become what you hate to beat it. I was wrong. Revenge can live under chandeliers too, if you redefine it as truth." Screens behind me flickered. An aide tried to pull a cable. He was not my aide. He was a guest who did not know the cables he could reach were decoys. The ones that mattered were out of reach. The third segment opened with photographs of my father with us when we were small, his hands steadying our bicycles, his face lit by cake candles. The room softened, which was part of the trap. Then the tribute frame shrank. On the right, a timeline slid into place. Medical examiner's initial report timestamped 11:14 p.m. A revised report timestamped 3:02 a.m. The revisions were subtle, a line about pre-existing conditions, an omission about medication interactions. The revised signature looked right until you laid it over the original. Then the differences glowed. Another layer, the night before my father died, a meeting listed on Daniel's calendar with a consultant no one in our organization had heard of. Payment wired in 2 parts to a company that had dissolved 2 weeks later. The consultant's name sat there on the screen like a bruise, and next to it, A photo from a traffic camera of Daniel's car idling outside a restaurant at the exact time a witness later heard raised voices and the scrape of a chair. I let the image hang. I did not say the word that everyone's mind supplied. I did not need to. I had spent months believing that my father's death was an absence I could not fill with facts. Then I found the facts. Not a smoking gun. I am not foolish, but enough smoke to choke a room used to easy breathing. Enough to make donors push their chairs back and stare at the exits as if the exits were explanations. Daniel stood. He said my name like an indictment. He called the materials fabricated. He called me cruel. He called the dead sacred. The screens did not answer him. They showed, quietly, the transfers into a private account 2 days after our father's funeral. The recipient was a cousin of the consultant. The memo line was blank. He slammed his hand on the table. The sound cracked like a shot in the marble hall. Our mother rose halfway, then sat, the wrap slipping from her shoulders. Her face was the part of the night I will never forget, a person falling without moving. A woman who had survived her husband now forced to survive the truth about her son. I did not look at Daniel when I said, "When my father died, I thought the worst thing that had been stolen from me was my future. Tonight I understand what was truly taken, the man who believed in me. For a long time, this was a story about what my brother did to me. But once I found what he did to our father, it became a story about what was done to the one person who was mine." People talk about closure as if it is a door you shut and lock. This felt more like opening all the windows at once and letting winter in. It hurt. It also cleaned. After the last video, the room did something beautiful. It breathed. No music. No clapping. Not even booze. Just the human sound of air moving through 100 throats that had been holding their breath for years. My mother approached me slowly, like someone crossing ice. "Rachel," she said, and stopped there. Sometimes a name is all that is left when the story has swallowed everything else. I wanted to be cruel and I wanted to be kind. I settled for true. "I tried to tell you," I said. She nodded, a small, terrible acknowledgement of me, of him, of what the word tried cannot fix. Later, long after the last car had peeled away and the last light had cut across polished floors, I walked to the center of the room and stood where the podium had been. I thought of my father leaning over ledgers with me, explaining margins like weather. I thought of the girl I had been when they told me to be quiet for the good of the family. I thought of the woman who had learned to organize a night the way some people organize a lifetime. You cannot bring the dead back by punishing the living. I know that. Revenge is not resurrection, but it can be a kind of restoration. Not of a person, of a name, of a balance, of the weight of what is true. If you had the chance to watch your betrayers burn in the brightest light, would you take it, or would you pour the champagne and pretend the night was only what it looked like? And if you discovered that the person who ruined your life also took the one person who believed in you, would you forgive his ambition, or would you build a ballroom and let the truth walk out in a dress everyone could see?